that gaze.
It is considered one of the most chilling moments ever captured in an American courtroom. You've probably seen this face before. You might have even heard fragments of his story, one of the strangest and most unsettling criminal cases in modern history. But there are details, dark psychological depths to this case that 90% of the world doesn't know. The true horror of this man isn't just in the crimes he committed. It lies in the environment that forged him and the unseen force he claims guided his hand. Those tattoos you see, those severe scars carved into his face and body, he claims he didn't choose them. He claims a completely different entity, a force far beyond human comprehension, drew them. This man is the living, breathing embodiment of a dark myth that has haunted humanity for thousands of years. Welcome back. Today, we are not just looking at what this criminal did, we are deconstructing why he did it. We are looking at the family that built him, the system that broke him, and the ancient Egyptian god of chaos that he claims possessed him. Before we dive into the dark psychology of Nikko Jenkins, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. The community is growing fast, and we are on track to become one of the most powerful storytelling channels on this platform. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Let's begin. For thousands of years, humanity has desperately tried to understand the mechanics of our universe, the sky, the stars, the brutal forces of nature. To our ancestors, everyday phenomena were terrifying. Lightning, disease, death. They were concepts far too massive for the primitive mind to process. Instead of seeking scientific answers, they found a simpler solution. They pointed to the sky and said, "The gods did it." Most ancient civilizations operated on a simple system of divine reward and punishment. If a god was angry, you got a thunderstorm or an eclipse. If the god was pleased, the harvest was good. The Greeks had over 180 deities, each micromanaging a specific part of existence. A god for war, a god for the sea, a god for lightning. The ancient Hindu texts describe millions of divine aspects, boiling down to primary deities and their legions of followers. The concept was universal: pick your power and worship it. But with this belief came a dangerous vulnerability. The only way ordinary people could communicate with these unseen forces was through the high priests. The priest was the ultimate middleman. If you truly believed the priest spoke for the gods, you would do anything he asked to avoid divine wrath. And history is soaked in the blood of this exact manipulation. Societies offered human sacrifices. Parents gave up their children. Cities were burned to ash. And all of it happened under one terrifying banner: the gods demand it. During the Crusades, armies marched under the Latin phrase Deus vult, God wills it. It was the ultimate psychological shield. We aren't murderers, they told themselves. We are instruments of divine will. The same justification echoes through ancient texts, like the biblical stories of the Amalekites, where entire populations, men, women, and livestock, were allegedly wiped out because a divine voice demanded their total erasure from history. When a human being genuinely believes that a higher power is ordering them to commit atrocities, something terrifying happens. Their conscience turns off. The moral compass shatters. They view themselves not as monsters, but as righteous executioners. We like to think we've evolved past this. We think science and modern psychology have cured us of these dangerous illusions. But they haven't. The ideology is still alive. We see it in modern geopolitical conflicts, and we see it in individuals. But while ancient societies had entire priesthoods to guide them, today there are individuals who hear these voices entirely on their own. The voices in their heads tell them what to do, and tragically, these voices never tell them to build or to heal. They only ever tell them to destroy. Which brings us to Nikko Jenkins. Born in 1986 in Omaha, Nebraska, Nikko Jenkins didn't just fall into the criminal underworld. He was born into its absolute center. His father had a massive criminal record. His mother was psychologically unstable. His extended family treated the local penitentiary like a second home. The Jenkins family didn't just break the law, they lived entirely outside of it. From a very young age, the warning signs were flashing red. Nikko was violent, aggressive, and entirely unpredictable. Instead of receiving deep psychological intervention, he was pushed into the juvenile justice system. By the time he was 8 years old, he had already seen the inside of a cell. By age 18, he was a known entity to every police officer in the district. Assault, bringing a weapon to school, riots, the list was endless. His mother reportedly gave him one piece of chilling advice: do whatever you want now, because the second you turn 18, the law will treat you like a man. Nikko listened, but his timing was tragically flawed. In late 2003, just months after his 18th birthday, Nikko and his crew attempted an armed carjacking and robbery. It went catastrophically wrong. The police swarmed the scene, shots were fired, and the consequences were permanent. While his accomplices received sentences ranging from 7 to 15 years, Nikko, now legally an adult, was handed a devastating sentence. The first 3 years of his sentence were standard. He was violent and difficult, yes, but he was just another inmate. He had only 2 normal tattoos on his body. But in his 3rd year, something shifted. Nikko began to isolate himself. His aggression spiked to unnatural levels. And then, he introduced the prison guards to his new friend. A friend named Apophis. Apophis wasn't an inmate. Apophis is the ancient Egyptian deity of chaos, darkness, and destruction. In Egyptian mythology, Apophis is the ultimate enemy of light and order, a serpent of pure, irredeemable evil that battles the sun god every single night. Nikko claimed this ancient god had revealed himself to him in his cell, and Apophis had demands. Over the next few years, Nikko became a puppet to this invisible entity. Apophis told him what to do, what to say, and exactly what to carve into his own flesh. Every scar, every bizarre tattoo that eventually covered Nikko's face, he claimed none of it was his choice. It was commanded by the serpent god. Between 2004 and 2012, Nikko racked up 71 severe disciplinary infractions, assaults, weapons manufacturing, riots. He wasn't just surviving in prison, he was the architect of its chaos. In 2009, he was granted a temporary furlough to attend his grandmother's funeral, accompanied by his sister and a guard. The exact second the guard removed his restraints, Nikko and his sister attacked the officer simultaneously. There was no prior communication, no signal. It was pure instinctual violence. But the true horror happened behind closed doors. 9 years into his sentence, Apophis allegedly gave Nikko a new command: silence yourself. Without hesitation, Nikko mutilated his own tongue, attempting to slice it completely to stop himself from ever speaking again. Medical teams barely managed to reconstruct it. A year later, the voice returned. This time, Apophis demanded a blood sacrifice in the form of facial mutilation. The reward? Apophis promised Nikko that if he did this, he would finally be released from prison. Nikko took a sharpened tool, carved his face according to the god's exact specifications, and ended up in the psychiatric wing. And then, the impossible happened. Just weeks after mutilating his face, Nikko Jenkins sat before a review board. Despite his 71 infractions, despite his self-mutilation, despite him looking the board members dead in the eye and stating that he was a killer, that his family were killers, and that he felt zero remorse, they let him go. In 2013, after a decade of absolute chaos, Nikko Jenkins walked out of prison. Apophis had kept his promise. Within 10 days of his release, Nikko Jenkins executed 4 people. There was no grand motive, no robbery gone wrong, no gang retaliation. He shot 2 men sitting in a truck simply because they were there. A few days later, he executed a man named Curtis Bradford. Shortly after, he pulled over a woman named Andrea Kruger, and when she resisted, he killed her too. When the police finally captured him, they were baffled. There was no thread connecting the victims. But in the interrogation room, Nikko sat perfectly calm. "I didn't kill them," he told the detectives. "I was just following orders." He introduced the detectives to Apophis. He explained that he was merely the vessel. The god of chaos had taken over his body, pulled the trigger, and demanded the blood. This triggered one of the most complex legal battles in psychological profiling. Was Nikko Jenkins a legally insane victim of profound schizophrenia? Or was he a hyper-intelligent, manipulative psychopath putting on the performance of a lifetime to avoid the death penalty? In court, his behavior was terrifying. He would laugh at the victims' families. He would speak in altered voices, claiming Apophis was in the room. When asked to apologize, he smiled and said, "I am just the tool. Talk to Apophis. Ask him for an apology." Psychiatrists were violently split. Half believed his madness was entirely genuine, a total fracture of the human mind. The other half believed he was a master manipulator, aware of every single move he was making. But then, the prosecution introduced the ultimate wildcard, the polygraph. They strapped Nikko Jenkins to a lie detector test. They asked him about the voices. They asked him if Apophis was real, if the god had appeared to him, if the ancient deity was the one ordering the murders. Nikko answered yes to all of it. And the machine? The machine showed absolutely no deception. According to his biometric responses, Nikko Jenkins was telling the absolute truth. He genuinely, completely believed that an ancient Egyptian god was living inside his mind. The court ultimately ruled that Nikko was competent enough to stand trial. They declared that his insanity was a calculated act. He was sentenced to death. Yet to this day, the sentence hasn't been carried out. He sits on death row, undergoing continuous psychiatric evaluations. And every time, the paradox remains. He is deemed legally sane, yet he never breaks character. He never wavers from his story. Nikko Jenkins is not the first man in history to claim a god ordered him to kill. From ancient high priests to modern cult leaders, history is littered with humans who project their darkest desires onto higher powers. But cases like his leave us with a chilling psychological question. If a man's reality is so thoroughly corrupted that his brain genuinely registers a myth as absolute truth, where does the madness end and the evil begin? I want to know what you think. Is Nikko Jenkins a brilliant manipulator who outsmarted the lie detector? Or did a lifetime of violence and isolation truly fracture his mind into creating a god of chaos? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If this deep dive into the dark architecture of the human mind hooked you, make sure to like and subscribe. Until next time, keep questioning the world around you.